Hey guys, happy post Super Bowl. Happy Monday to you. Damon, how are you, man?
I'm great, Kurt. Wonderful, wonderful weekend and ready for this week.
Let's dive in. So we're the Monday after Super Bowl. Should be like, I know, Damon, for at least like past 40 years, they say it should be like a national holiday this day after the Super Bowl. I kind of agree. But you know what? Found the Super Bowl, like this is kind of like our Super Bowl right now
Yeah.
because we got the one. We've got the only. We've got Chris Luecke in the house. Dude, how are you, Chris?
I'm doing well. I'm no Jalen Hurts or Patrick Mahomes, but I hope I can bring a good performance to this conversation.
Well, if you can you do like a little Barkley? Can you jump over backwards? Can you do like a little flip or,
I would be able to, but the ceiling's just not quite high enough in my new studio. So I had to start skipping out on the back flips for these conversations.
Fair enough. Fair enough. When we're at the Industrial Marketing Summit together, dude, we'll bust a couple of those out. I might pull a hamstring, but Chris, I can't wait to see you in action. So let's go here, man. Dude, repeat offender, dear friend of the show. You and I I always claim to fame, like, you and I are pre-COVID. So that's how long you and I have been friends. Let's start off with a little bit. You've had a couple of transitions. It's always tough keeping up with you, dude. Like you always got something new, something exciting. But let's give a little background on you. Who is Chris Luecke? How are you making the world a better place?
Yeah, so to give anyone that's not familiar with me, to give you a bit of an intro, I run a podcast called Manufacturing Happy Hour. So the reality is, it's the way I described it now and how I described it before we went live is I'm really running a podcasting and entertainment company because in addition to the podcast, which is a weekly interview show that's meant to distill and dissect the biggest trends and technologies impacting the manufacturing industry. It's an interview podcast, so I do all of this through interviews with manufacturing leaders. But it's evolved into a community and it's evolved into an event platform, all things considered. If there's a large trade show or maybe I'm just doing a small live podcast tour across a particular region of the Midwest, what I try to do is bring together manufacturing leaders under one roof. And that could be the virtual roof of my podcast and the digital platforms where our community congregates, or that could be an in-person event at a brewery or an after party at a conference, for example. So it's easiest to describe Manufacturing Happy Hour as a platform at this point, because that can encompass the podcast, it can encompass the community, and it can encompass all the events as well.
Well, I love that. And if you don't mind, I want to pull up your website just for everybody to take a peek. But I tell you, you've had such a fascinating career. And again, I've had the privilege of appreciate, value your friendship. I can't express my internal thanks for the number of people that I've become friends with because, and thanks to you. As a matter of fact, we're all going to be together at the Industrial Marketing Summit. I'm actually hanging out with Jeff Long, who I met through you. So,
nice.
Again, tons of friendships that I've met. Your Rockwell Automation, you've kind of had a nice transition. Let's dive into like your entrepreneurial journey. How did you go from like Rockwell, one of the largest corporations, just a powerhouse in manufacturing? Let's walk through your evolution into entrepreneurship.
Yeah, so I'm an engineer by degree, but I have spent the majority of my career in sales at Rockwell Automation, as well as Fiix Software, which is a company that Rockwell had purchased. I think there's an entrepreneurial aspect to being in sales. You have to manage your business. You need to make sure you're hitting your number. There's not necessarily a single playbook for building relationships, building rapport, building trust. So there's obviously there are proven best practices in sales and there are sales processes, right? I don't want to pretend it's the total Wild West, but I've seen a lot of different techniques used. And I feel like the most effective salespeople are the ones that are able to do it while being really authentic and true to who they are. So when I was working in sales, I realized it's like, hey, I'm comfortable being on camera. I don't have any, and I knew that was a big hang up for a lot of folks, right? They just, anytime the camera started rolling, they'd get petrified, right? So my thought was, hey, I need to reach my audience and I need to reach a younger audience in a lot of cases, in new and novel ways. And video podcasting, short videos, long form podcasts, that became kind of my unique, authentic way of reaching out to my audience. So, it just like it evolved over time. I wouldn't say when I started it that I thought it was going to turn into what would eventually be my full-time business, but here we are. I think there's something to be said about just staying consistent, doing, growing in little incremental bits and chunks, and then all of a sudden you look back 3 years, 5 years later, and you're like, wow, this is there's something here. I can scale it, I can monetize it, all those things start playing into it. So that's really kind of how I went from being a salesperson at a large industrial manufacturing company to being an entrepreneur in this day and age where there are more opportunities than ever to be an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely love it. And if I'm not mistaken, weren't you in the Bay Area when you started Manufacturing Happy Hour? Was that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Manufacturing Happy Hour got its start in late 2016 and started getting momentum in 2017. But I always count it. The first time I hit record and had a published video on YouTube was in 2016. So we count that as the starting date. And that was one. And the Bay Area is relevant to why I started it, because I had been in the Houston market prior to that. And that was definitely a more old school handshake, relationships, sales market in the industrial space in the Bay Area. There were a lot of folks my age. I was in my 20s at the time that would work a couple years here, jump to another company, work a couple years there, jump to another company. So, that let's say that company loyalty, wasn't necessarily the same thing because people were just jumping all over the place.
Right.
But what, on the flip side, I'm like, okay, well, if that's the reality out here, if it's a lot of young folks that are making decisions at these organizations, well, why not I reach them the way they want to be reached? Which I thought, how do I consume content? How do I get information? And that was through podcasts and YouTube and video series. So I'm like, well, I'm just going to do the same thing. No one else was doing it in the manufacturing space. So I'm like, I don't really have a guide to go off of, but let me just try this. And, there was no downside really. I mean, the only, it's not the worst thing that could happen was I would have made some videos and maybe no one ever saw them. Right. And I would have just learned it didn't resonate and I would have moved on. Right. Obviously that was not the case, and it resonated and grew into the platform it is today. But yeah, that's kind of I was out in the Bay Area, and I would say that's why it's also relevant to this story.
And I want to hit on this, and I know you've been on the show multiple times, so anything that I repeat, just, my respect and admiration for you, what you've done, because not only were you doing the videos, you did a great job at building community. And so, Damon, we're constantly talking about that. And it's kind of like, it's not a comfort zone for small manufacturers to think about community. At least the folks that I engage with, they're more like nose of the grindstone, just trying to build things. But you did a great job pre-COVID where you were setting up, virtual calls. People from all over the country were coming on. I met some fascinating people. I'd be like the only marketer in the room, the only e-commerce guy in the room. It was a bunch of automation guys. But I'm gonna dive into your website next, but just talk a little bit about like the spirit and like your dedication to building community and what that's meant and done for you. Just scratch on that for a second, if you would.
Yeah, I mean, it really did take off with COVID because I was hosting small happy hours out in the Bay Area. Very quickly I realized if I had a platform called Manufacturing Happy Hour, it didn't just have to be a video series. I'm like, oh, I can call a happy hour where 12 manufacturers in the area get together and grab a beer at one of the many great Bay Area breweries. So there had from an early time there had been an event focus to Manufacturing Happy Hour. But I really do think it started to shift and certainly evolve during COVID because we were stuck at home. We couldn't go anywhere for the majority of 2020, right? We had 2 months at the start of the year and then, lockdown from there. But I remember, and I'll share a link to this because it's crazy to think that this episode will be 5 years old soon. I hosted a Zoom call. First of all, I hosted a Zoom call on my birthday, which was St. Patrick's Day, right? So I had friends from all across the country show up to that. That was more something in my personal life, right? But that was on a Tuesday, March 17th. I had hosted like kind of a party on Zoom. Yeah. So I thought to myself, it's like, wait a second, if I can do this in my personal life, can I try this for the manufacturing industry as well? So I think it was probably the next day I put out a post. I'm like, hey, if you want to join us on Zoom, manufacturers from across the country sign on to Zoom this Wednesday afternoon or this Thursday afternoon, whichever it was. I think it was Thursday. So Thursday, March 19th, 2020, myself and probably about 12 other manufacturers signed on to Zoom. And I had this, I don't know what it was. I just said at the start of the call, it's like, hey guys, I don't know what we're going to talk about during this call, but I'm going to hit record if that's okay. So we recorded it and everyone shared what their gut reactions to being, on lockdown were going to be. This was back when we had no idea how long it was going to be, but everyone shared kind of their initial impressions, how everyone was feeling. And then like the 12 or so people on the call, we went around another time and said, hey, what are the actions we're going to take to make the most out of this situation? So anyway, that was recorded on March 19th. On March 20th, 2020, I released it as a bonus episode of the podcast. And it's still a pretty interesting, I'll call it a document, just to see where we thought things were going, just what the community vibe was like at the time. But long story short, there's a reason for me telling this story. That kind of launched essentially what became a weekly or bi-weekly effort where I said, hey, I'm going to throw these virtual Zoom calls so that way, we're stuck at home, but manufacturing happy hour is going to be a spot where you can come to hang out with folks in the industry virtually. And sometimes it'll be an open discussion. Sometimes we'll have a topic. We'll have like an MC or a keynote speaker, if you will, so that way there's more of a topic. And we just started doing that throughout all of COVID. And once the world started to open back up, that's when it's like, all right, let's take this out of Zoom and back into the real world. So 2022 is really when we started seeing a lot more manufacturing happy hour, live events, in-person parties. But, if there's a lesson here for other folks, right? Like try to think about what the strengths are in your business or the unique aspects of your business and try to pivot those to whatever situation the world throws at you, whether that's a pandemic or whether it's an opportunity to start throwing bigger and better parties for your customer community.
Bigger or better parties, man. And I know I was part of those Zoom meetings. I remember those clearly. Dave Griffith was on the call, Greg Mishu, Sully, so a bunch of just wonderful people that I again, the friendships that I was able to create thanks to you kind of spearheading and being the leader. And I cannot express my thanks. Let's dive into I'm going to share your website if you don't mind.
Please
and
do.
Let's take a look. So like someone's out there and they're just like, okay, I hear podcast and can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to back up one. So, okay, here is what you see when you land on Chris's website. We've got Manufacturing Happy Hour. Connect with Chris. We've got Chris Luecke here, Manufacturing Happy Hour. Do yourself a favor. Connect with Chris on LinkedIn. Does amazing work. So now we've got the podcast. And then, dude, like, could this be like, Damon, how's this? Everything else, like, bam, right there. All right. Making manufacturing content cool and approachable. Chris, let's hear what you've got going on here.
Yeah, so I will preface it. This is about to get very much updated in the near future. So it's still going to have a similar vibe because at the end of the day, Manufacturing Happy Hour is here to tell stories in the industry. So I created it as a way to really get people to start talking about manufacturing the same way they would as if they were having a drink with someone, right? So that's where the whole Manufacturing Happy Hour moniker came from. But, the biggest thing that I found like that I think is a win on my digital presence so far is just the consistency, whether that's on the website, whether that's on LinkedIn, like you were talking about. I've been doing this for over 5 years now. So when folks are and that's, I think, the thing, like, people can kind of take from this. It's like when you're trying to build trust in the manufacturing space, one of the best things you can do is just be consistent, right? Because then, and especially in this digital age where there's like a digital paper trail of like your values and your insights and the type of people you surround yourself with, that's why I think, having a digital presence, whether you're a salesperson, whether you're an individual contributor, whether you're an executive, you need to have some sort of digital presence, whether that's a website, whether that's a video channel, whether it's a podcast, whether that's just being active on LinkedIn, right? It doesn't need to be a full-blown platform like Manufacturing Happy Hour, but that's kind of the way I think of, things like websites, social media, etc.
Yeah, I love that. So, all right,
Yeah.
let's go here. So, Chris, we're for a small manufacturer. You're a booming. Are you introvert, extrovert? What? How would you? I'm just teasing. I'm kidding.
Definitely extrovert. I know some people are tricky to figure out which direction they go, but there's no fooling anyone.
Yeah,
Extrovert.
you are the booming extrovert. So let's what I again, it wasn't like upper management at Rockwell or somebody's like, hey Chris, like you really need to kind of like get yourself out there. Like you totally just took the bull by the horns and like you spearheaded this. You had the vision, you had the creation, right? And a major company supported you with that whole process, right?
Yeah, I think the lesson here is, or what I would share is like I feel like very rarely is someone going to come up to you and present the golden opportunity for you.
Mm-hmm.
People are going to need to go out there
Mhm.
and create it themselves,
Right.
and I think one of the things that worked well with manufacturing happy hour was it was never part of my formal job, but it was something that I'm like, hey, I have a voice,
Mhm.
I have a customer base, I have the potential to build a community. One thing I need to make sure I do is make sure I align what I do with the brand voice
Mhm.
in some
Sure.
way, shape, or form. I think it's important that people come off as their authentic selves. You don't want to sound like you're just regurgitating something that came off a marketing white paper.
Yeah.
But I do think I always tell folks, it's a two-way street, right? People who are employees at organizations, they need to be paying attention to, hey, what is the brand voice, right?
Yeah.
How does my company sound? And find a way to kind of merge that with your own voice, right? Because you want to be a good representative of who you're working for. And that's the ultimate way to create a win-win. And I share with marketing leaders now that I give more talks on content strategy. It's like, hey, if you ever see someone that's out there like starting to share content, do your best as a marketing organization, as the leadership of the company. If it's more of like a small, medium-sized manufacturing, you just don't have that large, individual marketing infrastructure. Do your best to empower that individual to continue to share and continue to be a representative of the company and continue to have a unique voice, but one that's also on brand, right? The cool thing about social media is if you share content, like it's going to be out there for a little bit and then more than likely it's going to disappear. So even if you say something that's, maybe there's a different word your company would have used to describe something. Hey, that post is going to disappear at some point. If you're the marketing leader or if you're the executive at that organization, what I would do is just say, hey, I love the content you're doing. By the way, we've got this new line coming out, or this is how we're saying, this is how we phrase things in this organization. Just collaborate with them so that way they get it right on the next post. I mean, that's kind of the way I think about it. It's if you're doing content right, it's going to be an ongoing activity versus this is your one shot to say the right thing. And I think too many people, when they get on camera, that is their concern. They're like, if I don't say the right thing right now, I'll never get an opportunity to say this again. It's like you could literally go on LinkedIn 2 hours later and post something else on LinkedIn. And then the things would, attention would start going over there, and you post another thing tomorrow, you post another thing the next day, the next week. And, all of a sudden, you're building that body of work and people look at your expertise and your insights and your values and the community you've built, not as a single post, but of the average of all the things you're putting out there, right? And that's kind of the way I think about content. If I'm just out there constantly trying to add value to my audience out there, and that involves knowing my audience, what they care about, what their challenges are, what's important to them, and building content that either helps bring my audience together, showcases some insight that might help them, either that day or maybe at some other point in time. Just constantly keeping my eye on the ball in that regard.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because so many times you're working with someone that hasn't done a lot of content development, and they're like, oh, we need this to do a video, and they're ready to bring in all the lights and extra camera people and all this stuff. And I'm like, dude, just start.
Yeah.
Just start. Or posting. Oh, is this post format? Just start. Write your thought for the day, whatever it is, and get going, because everyone looks back at the beginning and goes, oh man, that was pretty rough.
Yeah. One of the things I try to do is, just so I'm setting an example for the industry is I try to create some posts that are really simple, right? Like maybe just a couple sentences, no pictures. Like not everything has to look perfectly curated. If you, sometimes I think to myself, if I have like a moment of clarity that day, I'm like, this might be helpful if I shared it with my audience. A lot of times I'll like post it, maybe schedule it to go out the next day. Just so I have time to do a gut check. It's like, maybe that wasn't as insightful. Anyway, so sometimes that happens, but I do that stuff to get it out there, right? Because there's usually, I think, more damage, for lack of a better word, in second guessing yourself on a lot of the little things. Like I think, for little things, it's okay to make more of that gut reaction saying, hey, I was just in this sales meeting and I feel like this gave me clarity on something that I've been trying to learn as a salesperson for the past 6 years. I'm going to share that insight with, the industry on LinkedIn. Not necessarily, and I want to be clear, like if you're coming out of a customer meeting, you don't mention the customer name, right? Yeah. Things like that. But just like, I've been visiting a lot of customers for the past 6 months. And one thing that just hit me today was blank, right? And you share that out. It could be as easy as that. I wish more people would be willing to put out those, those posts that are less than curated, or just, film a video with their iPhone sharing something they learned, because that's how you build momentum. Because early on, no one's paying attention. Like you've got your LinkedIn network. They'll think it's cool that you shared something, but here's the reality. Like that post is going to go away pretty soon.
Yeah, and you do a phenomenal job. I like, you mentioned like being authentic, and just, what you see with Chris Luecke is what you get, and I don't know if there's anybody that's a bigger brand advocate for U.S. manufacturing. You're just doing a phenomenal job, stirring up young folks. And you share a lot of personal stuff. You're a music junkie. You and I've talked about music on the show before. I believe you're an avid traveler. How many countries are you at now, Chris?
I am at, I think it's 33. No, 34. 34. I'm at 34. I went to 34 right before I turned 35. So in an ideal world, I'd be keeping up with my age,
with
like
your
the
age.
amount of countries I've been to, or my respective age. But having traveled a lot now, I'm going back to a lot of my favorite spots, right? I've been back to London a handful of times. Right. You won't have to twist my arm too hard to get me to Berlin. So, but yes, 34 is the current country count.
I'm a huge man. It's one of my wife and I, my wife and myself, Berlin's one of our favorite cities. Now, do I have this? As we're talking, and I could be wrong. You're talking about posts. I thought about a post. Were you in Spain last year?
I was. Yeah, I was hiking the Camino.
You hiked the Camino, and I have to interject. Was it with your dad?
Yep.
So, dude, all right, I want to talk about. I'm going totally off script right now from what I planned, but you. Share. Let's hit that for a minute. And this is more like heck with everybody else. This is just for me. So you go to the Camino. Tell folks if they're not familiar with de Santiago. Am I pronouncing that correctly, or am I close? I probably butchered it. But
yeah, the Camino de Santiago.
Yeah,
so it is.
Share what it is, and dude, you did it with your dad. How cool is that?
Yeah, no, it was awesome. This is something my dad's wanted to do for a long time. He's been talking about it probably for 5 years, and I've been kind of nudging him, saying, "Hey, we should probably do this at some point." Because I'm pretty good about going on trips, right? As long as I put a little bit of planning into it, I know the barrier between me and getting on the trail in Spain is not much more than an airfare and a train to the right part of Spain, right? There are ways to get there and make it happen. So, for a little context on the Camino de Santiago, I believe it translates the way of St. James, right? So it's a pilgrimage that's rooted in faith, rooted in Catholicism, I believe is the right way to describe it. But, it's evolved over time, right? Where, regardless of, your background, right? Folks are going out there as it's a pilgrimage to gain clarity, reflect, whatever it may be. There's a great movie out there called The Way, which is about an individual that goes on the trek after the tragic passing of his son. I'm trying to remember. I think it's Martin Sheen is the main character in that movie.
I think you know what? I think you're exactly right. Yep.
So, there's a lot, there's pop culture around this. There, a lot of travelers around the world, they're very familiar with it. So, there are lots of reasons to go on the Camino, but to kind of weave this into a bit of a brand topic, if you will, I was on vacation, right? So I wasn't out there posting a lot of LinkedIn stuff, but I did share a post, saying, hey, my dad and I are out here to trek the Camino. Just kind of, mixing in that personal element of my life a little bit. And that post got a lot of visibility, right? And it was a great trek. I love traveling, love experiencing the cuisine somewhere. I've done a lot of other treks in my life in Patagonia and the Canadian backcountry. So, walking through a more populated part of Spain was certainly an easier trek than some of those ones where I've been really off the beaten path. But long story short, it was an awesome trip. We got to go to Portugal afterwards as well, like just a great time all around. But when I came back, I went to a couple of industry events, right? I was at, which one was it? I went to Pack Expo down in Chicago. I went to Automation Fair out in Southern California. And each time I bumped into, a couple people that had seen that I had been on that trek, right? And it was all of a sudden, it was something different that didn't have that beyond just, hey, here's what I think about content strategy right now, or hey, here's what I think about building community, or hey, here's what I think about automation. It was a different way to build a relationship with someone, strengthen a relationship with someone, build trust, build rapport, whatever it is with someone, because they had seen that social post and it had translated to a real world conversation that we connected over the next time we saw one another. Cause I'd talked to a handful of people. It's like, oh, I did that, X number of years ago, or, hey, I've always wanted to do it. I think it's so cool that you went on that trip with your dad. So just a lot of different ways that, being a little vulnerable, sharing a little bit about your life outside of what you do for work, it translates back into building trust and relationships in your day job as well. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. And same here. And so obviously I follow you come up on my feed frequently, and I was following your trip, and I'm very tight with my dad. Damon, you had an amazing relationship with your dad. And it just completely warmed my heart to see that you had an opportunity with your dad while your dad's still here with us. Cause dads don't stay, around forever, and health comes and goes. And so, dude, and like you're saying, it's not always about business. So like Damon, we talk with a lot of manufacturers, very, might be resistant to get on LinkedIn, don't want to talk about anything personal. But Chris, I love how you're sharing that, and you're just being your true self. Like, these are things you would talk about if I met you in person. You're not doing anything different online.
Right? Yeah. What I kind of realized over time was like, I don't need to turn LinkedIn to Facebook, right? There's a different way I use LinkedIn versus other social media platforms. But I tend to mix in things from my personal life or my hobbies as Easter eggs in some of my broader posts, right? A lot of times it's like, mentioning something about music or mentioning something about craft beer, all these things that are on my list of things I love during my spare time. And that over time, people are like, oh man, Chris is a fan of craft beer, or wow, Chris is really into punk rock and things like that. And that gives you, it's just something that allows you to relate to certain people within your audience on a different level. And it doesn't really alienate anyone else. If for example, like, I'm not a hunter, but I know a lot of people that hunt, right? Like, if I did that, I'd probably have that as a rapport builder, right? Everyone has different things that are going to overlap with their different comrades, if you will.
Yeah. I absolutely love that. So I want to slide in here. I want to talk one more question about your business. Then we're going to dive into the Industrial Marketing Summit. Again, if you're just joining us, we're over the top of the hour. We're here with Chris Luecke, Manufacturing Happy Hour. Please do yourself a favor, connect with Chris on LinkedIn, stop by his website, Manufacturing Happy Hour. So Chris, you said that you're kind of like, podcast entertainment. Now back to, I recall you guys did a big event, and I think you put on you had a 90s little concert thing. Did I see that correctly?
Yeah.
All right. So talk a little bit when you say hey, we're kind of becoming a little bit of an entertainment company. Talk about some of the previous events. And then I know you've got some big events coming up. Let's go there.
Yeah, so it's funny that you bring up the concert because that was something completely different, right?
Yeah,
We've never
that's
we've never
awesome.
done something like that before, and to an extent, that's exactly why I wanted to do it because
Right.
I'm like, people love going to see live music, right? And they
Right.
want to go to, people like going to proper concerts, not like, hey, we're at an after party at a conference, there's a band playing in the corner, right? That's just kind of there for some filler, and which is all well and good, right? Nothing wrong with that. But I'm like, what if we threw an event where the purpose was to go and rock out and see the band and be really into the music? And that was the whole thought process. And the other piece of it is, hey, people are traveling for work. They don't always have when you're traveling for work, right? Your time is limited, especially if you have kids, so when you're out, this might be your only opportunity to go to a concert, if you will, or to do that really fun thing. So I'm like, it doesn't always just have to be a networking happy hours. Like, let's start mixing in comedy nights. Let's start mixing in concerts. So that way, when you are traveling, you can still have those unique, authentic experiences that don't feel like a corporate event. That you're, especially if you're in your 30s or 40s and you're raising a family, you probably don't have time to go out as much anymore. So,
Yeah.
hey, but if you're having to travel for work anyway, let's make use of those 3 or 4 days where you're outside of the house and not only get a lot of stuff done, but also let's give you the opportunity to have some fun in a way that you'd really, that you'd do that you do it if you had the time to go out and things like that. So that was kind of the vibe there. We had 150 people show up to this old school punk rock club in Chicago. It just a ton of fun all around.
Nice.
So we'll be doing more stuff like that. I do have other events coming up that will some that are more traditional happy hours, others that are going to kind of change the game again. So a lot of fun stuff on the horizon.
Awesome. I do have to go here. You're a craft beer enthusiast, right? So you're walking into a brewery. You're excited about what they got on tap.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you going?
Ooh, anywhere in the world?
No, I mean, what are you looking for on their menu? On there, they've got their 10 or so of theirs that are up there. Which ones are you looking at first?
Great question. So my beer preferences do evolve and kind of shift over time. I'm into certain beers at different times. As now that I have, been a craft beer enthusiast for like around 15 years now, I would say some of the tried and true ones are IPAs just because there's so much variety under that category. But when someone asks me, it's like, hey, what's your favorite beer? What's your favorite style of beer? What's your favorite specific beer? I am looking for something to answer your question. I'm looking for something local first and foremost, right? If I can find something I haven't had before, or if I can find one of my favorite beers that might only be available in that city, whether that city is Austin, Texas, San Francisco, California, whether it's an old favorite or something new, I'm getting something that more than likely you can only get in that region.
Yep.
The other thing I like to say is my favorite beer in general are seasonal beers that pair well with that moment in time. Like if it's since we're going to Austin soon, it won't be 100 degrees, but if it's 100 degrees in the middle of summer in Austin, I'm going for a lager because that's going to taste refreshing, cold. Like that's what you need at that point in time. If I'm hanging out in Milwaukee right now, it's cold. It's below 32 degrees Fahrenheit right now. So I'm probably going to go with something darker, more fuller bodied in that case. And that can range, right? That could be anything from a really piney IPA to a barrel aged stout, or even something like a Schwarzbier, like a dark German lager. So that whole answer was an opportunity for me just to name drop a lot of styles that I enjoy. But no, that's my very. Awesome. I realized I didn't really give you a specific answer. I basically said,
but you did.
You can order everything. That's kind of what it comes down to.
You did local, seasonal. Start there.
Local and seasonal. And you know what else he did, Damon? Very, very. I tell you, Chris Luecke is like, one of the most fascinating guys, because now when we're in Austin, anybody that caught this, now they know what to buy him when they're at the bar, right, Chris? He kind of teed it up. Now they know buy something local, something seasonal when you're buying Chris a beer, and he'll be happy. So how about that?
Good stuff.
All right, let's dive into the Industrial Marketing Summit. Is coming up. My goodness gracious, just next week, next Wednesday, right? Where did time go? Do I have that right? It's a week.
Not
from
next
Monday
week, the week after. We got 2 weeks, but it is sneaking up fast.
Yeah.
already? Today. I got to look at my
It
calendar.
is the 10th today.
So, all right. So the week after, it's 2 weeks,
Yes.
right? 2 weeks. All right. Thank you, Chris. Man, I panicked there for a minute. I'm like, wait, okay. All right. So 26, 27, 28. Let's take a look and let's go to the website. And Chris, I do believe you did a wonderful session last year. You were moderating a great session.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk a little bit about, first off, your insight, your thoughts from the Industrial Marketing Summit from last year. What was your takeaway from last year?
Best event we could have done in the industrial marketing space. Like it was for especially, I mean, the whole team behind it has done an incredible job this year. Did an outstanding job last year because this was the first last year was the first time it was its own standalone event. It used to be like a side event that was part of content marketing world, but last year was the first time it was a standalone event. And I am always impressed when anyone just absolutely knocks out of the park with, let's say with the first year of the event, right? For a lot of events, I would expect there to be like a little hiccups, right? If this is your first time doing it, not the case with the Industrial Marketing Summit. It was incredibly well executed. And then just beyond like things going smoothly and the schedule being full of relevant, timely content, it was a who's who in industrial marketing in the US. Like pretty much anyone that's anyone in this space was there. And that's not to make someone feel left out if they didn't go last year, but being able to just riff with people that are in many cases, I think the thing about industrial marketing is we are not always the I run my own company, so I'll keep myself out of this, but industrial marketers are not always the heroes that they should be within an organization, right? Because if industrial marketing is done right and is done with, some ingenuity and it's unique, it's a revenue driver, right? It is not sales support. It is not making a white paper, a PowerPoint look good and handing it off to the sales team. It is a revenue driver in its own right where the marketing leaders understand what the goals of the company are, who they want to reach, and create a content strategy that ultimately results in brand recognition and leads. So I'm going down this path because I think the most important part about this event is the quality of folks there. And if you are a marketer that might be a one-person show at your company, this is a spot to rub shoulders with other people that are on larger marketing teams. Maybe they're in the same boat, right? But this is a place to build your alliances of other industrial marketers that can help you out and you can exchange ideas with that will last all year long. So I think it's incredibly important in that regard.
Absolutely love it. And as a matter of fact, might be a little hard to tell right there, but if you take a peek, like there's Chris Luecke right there moderating his session. It was a phenomenal session, Damon. So Eddie Saunders was on stage. Let's see, who else was on stage with you that day?
Nikki Gonzalez and Jordan Yates. That was our panel.
That was your panel. I'll tell you, man, it was a
powerhouse.
Jordan was, as a matter of fact, Jordan came on the show, Damon, last year, like 2 weeks after she presented. And so Nikki's been on the show, just a dynamo. Let's dive into this year. So some phenomenal speakers. Chris, you know this? Have you ever met this guy before? Do you know him?
Just a few times. Yeah, he's okay.
he's okay. He's a keeper, right? So we've got some phenomenal speakers. Dale was just on the show last week. Yep. He is just an absolute powerhouse. Can't wait. I mean, I'll tell you, we go right down the line. But Chris, just share a little bit. What are you going to be talking about at the Industrial Marketing Summit?
Yeah, so the session, as folks looking at the screen can see, is how to host an unforgettable live event with a massive digital impact. And if I were to summarize what this discussion is about, in fact, I'm looking at my notes from it right here. I've got the whole thing written out, and it's a talk I've never given before, but I'm excited to debut it at the Industrial Marketing Summit. I would say the biggest preview I can give folks right now is that this session is meant to be a mindset shift around how you go about planning, promoting, and executing an event before, during, and after that event. So that way you can turn the event life cycle into like a 3-month endeavor that engages your community, gets your brand out there, and creates a lot of excitement that you wouldn't if you were just doing a typical webinar, if you will, right? So I'm a big believer in doing community first events, right? Don't make the event about yourself, make it about the people that are going to be there. So, for example, when I do podcast tours and we do a live podcast, we've got some coming up in Indianapolis and Columbus. We're going to make it about the Columbus manufacturing community. We're going to make it about the Indianapolis manufacturing community. So keep a community first approach and promote, document, take photos, all of these type of things, because hey, right after this call, I'm about to put out the event artwork. I'm going to put the links to the events. I'm going to start that hype, right? That's going to be one of the impressions the event makes, right? I'm going to be talking about it for the 3 weeks leading up to it. What type of partners we're bringing to the table, what type of nonprofits we're bringing to the table for these events. At the event, there's going to be photographers, videographers. It's going to be a content creation event in and of itself. You take photos, you make those photos available to folks that are there so they can share them as well. I say all this because what this turns into is it's not just an event that takes place from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. after work on a Tuesday. It is an extravaganza that engages your community and also is plastered across your digital channels, across social media. And hey, maybe that results in a new email list. Maybe that results in some brand awareness that pays off a year from now. But it's just a way to shift your mindset around an event. It's not just the thing that occurs after work at one moment in time, but it can be something that you build into your content strategy, and depending on the size of the event, for a 3 to 6 month period of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just absolutely love this.
It'd be great.
So, I mean, it can be either a physical event, it can be a major conference, it can be your own event. And again, like when you look at like what you've done, like you've just completely created your own opportunities with Manufacturing Happy Hour. Are you podcasting from the Industrial Marketing Summit?
I will at the party on Thursday night. I'll be recording a couple podcasts there live. So if you want to sit in our area and listen into what we're talking about, it'll be focused on, we're going to be talking about marketing for small companies. We're going to be talking about marketing for enterprise. And we're also going to be diving into a bit of the MarTech that's out there right now as well. So it'll be a nice little smorgasbord of topics. Really looking forward to that.
Well, absolutely love it, Chris. And for a shameless plug, we're going to be going live ourselves on, I think Thursday. There's like a break at 2:30. So I'd love to have you available, get you on stage with us. We're just going to do a little rapid fire. I think you were with us last year, right? I
jumped on it. I'm looking forward to being a part of that party, so to speak, this year as well.
Yeah, so Jeff, I'm bringing Jeff Long because last year, man, Damon, I have a really pathetic setup, and so I'm bringing Jeff Long's got more muscle with the camera, so we'll have Jeff Long this year. How about Chris? Let's go here. We mentioned, I want to give a little love, little shout out to Joe Sullivan, the entire team at Gorilla 76, Wendy Covey, True Marketing. We had two of their teammates were on the show Friday.
Yep.
We got Adam from Cadenas. Just a little shout out to the folks on just think what it takes to put this event on, right? Like you're the party planner, you know what it takes. Let's give a little shout out. What's your perspective for those guys?
Yeah. In terms of what it takes, what it takes to put on the event, the nice thing is they're very savvy marketers as well. So, they know what they're doing when they put on these events, but what it takes to pull it off, it takes a great team. It takes being organized, it takes picking it takes focusing on the details, right? You got to get a venue that feels comfortable. You got to get spots for the after parties that feel comfortable, that are engaging, that are unique, curating the right list of speakers. But I think it goes back to one of the earlier points that I was making is that, you got to know your audience, right? What are they most interested in? What is going to get someone to sign up and say, hey, I'm making the investment of money, I'm making the investment of time. What are the things that are going to entice them to get there? And then once they're there, how are you going to deliver on that? And by creating the agenda that they have with the team they have, they've created a bulletproof team, a bulletproof list of activities to make sure that the event is going to be a success. That's the thing that I would say that team does really, really well in terms of putting this together.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think if anybody's on the bubble, if you're on the fence, go back. If you're just catching us now, hit that little replay button. But Chris, I think you hit it right on the head. It's not just the amazing speakers, the energy, the innovation, the creativity, but just like rubbing elbows with each other in halls, people that you've, you and I've had a relationship for years. We finally get to high five and hug it up in person. It's just such a wonderful event. So, all right, I know you're a busy dude, and I'm keeping you. We're going to start winding down here. Events that you have coming up on the horizon that you want to share for folks. Where can we catch Chris Luecke on top of the Industrial Marketing Summit? Where else can we catch you?
Yeah, so actually that week I'm doing 2 events. So I'm starting the week at the Midwest Manufacturers Trade Show and Summit in Branson, Missouri. So I'm going to be there kicking off that event with Drew Crow.
Cool.
We'll be taking the stage together there. So that is February 24th through 26th. Then I'm heading right down to the Industrial Marketing Summit after that, which is the 26th through 28th, I believe. Is that correct?
26th through 28th. That's correct. Yep. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Yep.
So the week after that, we go on the first Manufacturing Happy Hour tour of the year, which is going to be the 2025 Winter Tour. It's the Blizzard Bash. I'm teaming up with Clifton Larson Allen and the Association for Advancing Automation on that. On March 3rd through 6th, we're going to Kalamazoo, Michigan on the 3rd. We're going to Indianapolis, Indiana on the 4th, Columbus, Ohio on the 5th, and Toledo, Ohio on the 6th. So back to back to back to back. It's going to be a big week. They're going to, in addition, there are quite a few, so I'll do the abbreviated version here. We got an after party at ProMat on March 18th. We've got an event in Rothschild, Wisconsin on April 24th. A comedy night in Boston on April 30th. A special surprise party in Manufacturing Happy Hour on May 10th. More details coming on that soon. That's in Milwaukee. And then on May 13th at Automate, I'm teaming up with Jake Hall, who we saw earlier on the screen. We're doing our annual Extra Innings after party at Automate. So
nice.
There's a lot going on between now and May, and I'm looking forward to all of it.
And Chris, best way for folks to kind of, if anybody's in any of those cities or available or interested in catching your events, can just connect with you on LinkedIn, follow your website. Is that the best?
I think the best spot actually is go to manufacturinghappyhour.com/tour. That'll take you to our event page. That's where you can get tickets. Register for all the events that have been released so far. We just posted the spring tour there. So manufacturinghappyhour.com/tour is usually the best spot to go to access the events that I am hosting directly, right? Of course, check out the Industrial Marketing Summit, check out the Midwest Manufacturers Trade Show and Conference. But manufacturinghappyhour.com/tour, that's the best way to find me and the parties that I'm throwing.
All right, so super fast. Let's see. Did I catch it? Am I at the right place?
Yep, you got it. Yep, okay. That's our. So scroll down. You'll see all our events are down there. So
nice.
And if you have any doubts of our ability to throw a party, you can see all of our past events as well. So it's going to be a good time.
This is phenomenal. And Damon, and I love it, Damon. We've actually had somebody from Clifton Larson Allen on the show before. So that was cool to hear those guys are supporting you. So that is absolutely wonderful. So, all right, Chris, as we wind down, my last question for you, I'm going to stop sharing. So again, Chris Luecke, LinkedIn, go to manufacturinghappyhour.com. You want to catch those events, just throw a little backslash, throw on tour, and you're going to catch any of those events. If you're in one of those cities, man, you do not want to miss this. Great place to network, wonderful way to meet new friends and just and meet the one and only Chris Luecke. Chris, going from like Rockwell Automation, you've been all over the world, all these countries. You just did the Camino with your dad. As you were building up your business, this entrepreneurial journey that you started about 15, 16 months ago, could you please share what's the best business advice that you've ever received that has really helped elevate your business, and or that you want to share with a new entrepreneur? Best business advice that you've ever received.
Yeah, I'm trying to go through the Rolodex of great pieces of advice that I've received. There are a lot. I'm going to share one that I don't always share because this one's pretty pragmatic, but I've built a business that's really built around a lot of my passions, right? Like throwing events. There's some craft beer mixed in, podcasting's mixed in.
Right.
One of the best pieces of advice I got from Mike Kromicki when I was collaborating with him on one of my first startups was, I was trying to figure out where to spend my time. And he was saying, it's like, hey, you gotta pay attention to where the money's coming from. And I say that because, it's not, that's not to say, hey, all you're focused on is the money, right? But when you have a lot of competing priorities, it is really important to keep in mind, like, where are the opportunities that are going to pay the bills, right? Who are the partners that I work with, that we just create this big win-win for one another, and both of our businesses succeed in the process, right? With all the things that can distract a business owner, I think understanding where the money is coming from and making sure you're putting time into that is incredibly important. And that could be where the money is coming from short term, as well as where the money is coming from long term as well. That's not to confuse, just short term thinking with long term results, right? You got to be thinking of both. But I do think, especially for an entrepreneur that might be getting overwhelmed with all the different things they could be doing, the different directions they could be going in, it's a great way to take a quick reset and say, what are the things that's going to allow my business to survive, right? Like, you got to sit down and look at the things that, I need to do these activities so that way this business will grow and be viable for the next 6 months, year, 5 years, etc. So that would be the piece of advice I would share today. I know there are others that other pieces of advice out there that I could have gone in those directions as well, but we'll end with that one for today.
Well, drop the mic, my friend. That is brilliant advice. And it sounds, I love the line where, it's not always, it's easy. How do they say it? It's simple, but it's not always easy, and it's hard to decipher when you're a solopreneur, entrepreneur, like, hey, what are, I call them like those time wasters, profit killers, where you think it's a priority, but maybe there's other things that you should be focusing on. So brilliant advice. I thank you for that. We're going to close down. Damon, thoughts, takeaways. What are your thoughts from this wonderful, incredible conversation with Chris Luecke?
Yeah, Chris, it's awesome talking to you and hearing how you transitioned, from your sales career into what you're doing now that really fuels your passion, interacting with your passion and helping manufacturers all in one. It really is inspirational to hear your story and what you're doing now and helping people, because it does make a huge difference. You're bringing the younger generation into manufacturing. You're bringing people into a community that really can talk about some things that they may not have places to do that otherwise, honestly, and in fun settings. So it's awesome to hear what you're doing.
Yeah.
And was it Zig Ziglar said, if you pursue your passion, you never work a day in your life. And Chris, like when you see like the music, like you said, the craft brew, your passion for manufacturing, and just, and just your unapologetic commitment to building community, and you do it with integrity, you do it with authenticity. And for that, I'm going to invite everybody to give Chris Luecke a big round of applause. How about a standing ovation for Chris Luecke today? Chris, I appreciate you. I cannot wait to see you. I'm going to see you. I'm glad you corrected me, because I would have been hanging out in Austin next week, wondering where everybody was. Right. So I will see you in 2 weeks, dude. I've got a big high five waiting for you. Hang out with us for 1 second. And I just want to share with everybody, man, just go out and be someone's inspiration, just like this young guy, and you're going to make the world a better place. So Chris, thank you. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Guys, have a great rest of your week. Damon and I will be back here Friday. God bless, and just keep crushing it, man. So see you.
Have a great week, everyone.